folks, it's John Adamson, the Rehab and Documentation Guru, and today we're going to talk about cognitive testing for dummies, meaning physical therapists. Just because in school, back in that day, we didn't really learn much in the way of cognitive assessment, especially if you're an older school therapist like myself. Maybe the younger crowd, the new DPTs, etc., get some practice on that area. But for the most part, if we've been in the field for a while, we don't test cognition and we don't really think about its impact. But one of the things that insurance providers expect is documentation will include information about the patient's ability to learn new material. The other thing we got to consider is that cognitive impairment, unlike other underlying impairments that we can influence, like strength, balance, coordination, etc., cognitive impairment also is an underlying impairment that can impede function. And even if we do improve those other underlying impairments to their maximum, the patient may still be functionally impaired. So it's important that a physical therapist equip themselves with some tests that are standardized that they can administer within their own scope of practice, and then take that information to better determine what the patient is capable of doing, what their long-term plans are, and long-term goals, of course. And the two tests I want to talk about today are the Mini Mental State Exam and the MoCA, the Montreal Cognitive Assessment. So let's start with the Mini Mental State Exam, which is a test that generally the APTA is behind and supportive of. Now, there's two versions. The Mini Mental State 1 is still free of charge. You don't have to pay anything for it. But there is a little bit more comprehensive, a little bit more sensitive Mini Mental State Exam version 2, which you do have to pay for, and you have to have some kind of licensed agreement to utilize. So you can find the Mini Mental State Exam version 1 online for free. There are still good psychometric parameters behind it. The Mini Mental State Exam of the two I've talked about is the one that's better to determine more severe cases of dementia and where the patient is from a baseline perspective. Now let's compare that to the MoCA, the Montreal Cognitive Assessment. It is free of charge, it's available online, has good psychometrics behind it, and anybody can administer it as well. The nice thing about the MoCA is that it's more sensitive to mild cognitive impairment, or MCI, than the Mini Mental State Exam. So if you have a patient who you're not quite sure if all their screws are tightened, and if you're not quite sure if the elevator goes to the top floor, then perhaps the MoCA would be the better test to administer to determine fine, mild cognitive impairments. But if you've got somebody that's clearly impaired and you suspect they're a little bit beyond mild cognitive impairment, then you might want to look at the Mini Mental State Exam. These two tests will give a physical therapist enough information to help guide their care planning to determine whether the patient is capable of learning new activities, which we often are treating the patient and training the patient in, and whether we need to get a caregiver more involved. And the last thing I would say about this, if you're in a physical therapy only case and you take these tests and you find out there's a problem, it's a good screening tool to determine whether or not another discipline that does more directly impact cognition, like OT and speech, might want to be involved. Anyway, this has been John Adamson, the Rehab and Documentation Guru. Hoping you find this content helpful. Please like and subscribe, and please feel free to comment and add suggestions for what you would like to see for future videos. Take care, and God bless.